Hello, everyone. We had some technical difficulties during our webinar, so this is a re-recording of the first portion of the webinar and introducing our guest speaker. So I wanted to start out by acknowledging that the land on which we are joining from today is the unceded, unsurrendered territory of one or more member nations of the Wabanaki Confederacy. Our organization, the Nashwaak Watershed Association, works in the traditional territory of the Wolastoqey, the people of the beautiful and bountiful river Wolastoq. These people were the original stewards of this land, and we recognize the ongoing contributions, resilience, and strength of these Indigenous communities. As we move forward, we strive to listen, learn, and work together in the spirit of reconciliation and mutual respect. Before we begin, I'd also like to acknowledge our funders for this webinar and our Natural Edge program. None of this work would be possible without the support of Environment and Climate Change Canada, the Environmental Trust Fund, the Wildlife Trust Fund, and of course, the help of NBEN. So as some of you may know, the Nashwaak Watershed Association is an environmental nonprofit that has been active since 1995. Currently, we do work in all areas. So we have several aquatic programs, we have a forest stewardship program, various floodplain restoration projects, and of course, our education and outreach programs. This webinar is to share some information on our landowner riparian restoration, the Natural Edge program. And we're very grateful to have Chloe Lajoie from Watersheds Canada with us today. As the National Conservation Director at Watersheds Canada, she manages the Natural Edge program, working with landowners to create resilient shorelines to better withstand the impacts of climate change. Chloe's going to talk about the Canada-wide program and what you can do on your own property, and then I'll take some time to tell you a little bit about what we offer specifically within the Nashwaak Watershed. At the end, we will have some time for questions. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Chloe to get started.
All right, well, hello everyone. My name's Chloe. Thank you all so much for having me tonight. So I'm the National Conservation Director at Watersheds Canada. I've spent a lot of my time at Watersheds Canada working on our Natural Edge program, building and developing it to share with groups all across Canada. And I'm happy and excited to be sharing this with you tonight. So to get started, I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with Watersheds Canada and who we are, but we are a national not-for-profit organization and registered Canadian charity, and we've been working to protect and improve our freshwater ecosystems since 2002. We're based in Perth, Ontario, but we deliver our programs working with other grassroots organizations all across Canada so that we can increase our reach and work with many more landowners and partners all across Canada. We are a charity, so we raise every dollar each year through grants, foundations, and donations that we put right back into our programs to keep on delivering. We do have various programs. Our longest running program is the Love Your Lake program, and this is in partnership with the Canadian Wildlife Federation. And it's an education and stewardship program where we work with lake associations to do shoreline assessments of every single property on a lake. And all of data that's collected is then inputted into a database and produces custom shoreline health reports. So each property owner gets their own property report, and it really gives them an idea of how healthy their shoreline is, as well as gives recommendations for what they can do to improve upon it. In addition to that, we have our Planning for Shorelands program, and this really provides guidance for waterfront planning and policies. It has many great resources that landowners can use for recommendations for waterfront development, and it's really just a growing information hub of natural climate solutions that's explained in plain language, provides practical best management toolkits, and focuses on education and outreach as well. In the bottom left there, you'll see a handout, and that's for our freshwater stewardship community. And that's an online webinar community where we highlight different topics, do different webinars with key speakers. And with each webinar, we have a handout produced. So I really encourage you to check out a lot of those webinars. Even if you're not available, you can sign up and then get a link to the recording afterwards too. In the bottom right corner, we have our fish habitat enhancement program. And here we do various enhancement projects like doing walleye spawning enhancement, trout spawning bed enhancements, brush bundles where we work with lake associations to sink brush into specific areas on a lake. And this is to create that underwater vegetation that a lot of lakes are lacking because they're so overly developed now. And then finally, we have our Natural Edge program, which is what we'll be focusing on today. So the Natural Edge is a shoreline naturalization program designed to help waterfront property owners naturalize by planting a selection of native trees, shrubs, and wildflowers that are suitable for their property. We really aim to provide all the tools and education needed to understand the problem we face and make it easier to restore our shorelands. So we built the technology and resources, including our Natural Edge Planting Plan Design app and tools that really focus on removing common barriers to action, such as lack of guidance, knowledge, and capacity. And we work with various homeowners on this. So we work with people who own a cottage, who only go up on the weekends. We also will work with like residential property owners who live there full time. And then we also really like to highlight public demonstration plantings. So we'll work with municipalities, cities, townships to create these natural water edge. And then on top of that, we'll also work with farmers and work on agricultural lands to create vegetative buffers. So you may have noticed that I've been trying to say the word shoreland instead of shoreline. And that's because our program looks at your waterfront property as a whole. Um, we use this term because it encompasses so much more than just where the land and the water meet. And the beauty, health, and enjoyment of water comes from what happens on this shoreline property. Every shoreline is composed of 4 sections: the littoral zone, shoreline, riparian, and land zones. So the littoral area actually spreads from where the water meets the land out into the water until where the sunlight cannot penetrate and reach the bottom anymore. So this is where you'll see a lot of aquatic vegetation when you're out on the lake. That's that littoral zone. The shoreline is where the water meets the land, so it's a very thin line, which is why we're so focused on the shoreland as a whole. And one of the main areas that we focus on is the riparian area. And this is the first 10 to 15 meters from shore, from where the water meets the land, moving backwards towards up your property. But then on top of that, we also look at the upland area. So really for this whole zone, it encompasses about 30 meters back. And we really like our program focuses here because the actions that you take on this area directly affects the health of your lake. And that's the reason why it's the focus of our restoration program. Canada's freshwater is experiencing immense development pressures, and the health of our lakes is rapidly declining. The way we once viewed and developed waterfront properties is changing, and it's expediting the degradation of our shorelines in unprecedented ways. Algae blooms, loss of biodiversity, and poor climate resiliency, such as flooding and erosion, are just some of the impacts that we're seeing. And if you think back on it, like how we're treating waterfront and developing our properties is quite different than how we used to. Before, there used to be more just cottages that people will go and visit on the weekend. And now we're seeing a lot of these cottage to home developments. So we're changing from cottages, building these permanent homes on the same section of land. All of our homes are a lot bigger than they used to be, and we're also going from just being there on the weekends to being there full time. So we're really having a different impact on our shorelines. Scientific research says that we need to have 75% of our shorelines natural in order to protect water quality. And out of 40,000 shoreline assessments that we've completed, only 22% of properties actually meet this minimum criteria for sustaining lake health. So how is climate change affecting this? Well, freshwater ecosystems have been identified among the ecosystems most vulnerable to climate change worldwide by changing temperatures. Climate change makes a huge impact in a lot of different ways. We're seeing increased extreme weather events such as heavy rain and floods, and that results in more erosion, changes in habitat range and spawning seasons for wildlife due to warming temperatures, as well as a decrease in water quality. We have more frequent algae blooms, and this is caused by warmer waters and increased nutrient runoff. So you can see in the photo here, that's an aerial photo that was taken by one of our great volunteers, and there was this was a major algae bloom, and I love it because even though this looks like a very natural shoreline, the rest of the lake is highly developed. But then this is where this algae bloom is occurring. So I find it kind of like a nice stark contrast to show. But really, in the summertime, when you have this increase in nutrients and the warmer temperatures, then this is causing algae blooms, and that's when we'll see like fish die off as well. And these will continue to get worse if we don't act now. So, naturalizing the shorelines is a great way to build resiliency and mitigate the impacts of climate change. Now that we know the issues that our lakes are facing, let's look at the benefits of a natural shoreline and how we can protect from the impacts of climate change. So shorelines are one of the most ecologically productive places on Earth. 90% of all aquatic life is born, raised, and fed within the first like 10 to 15 meters from shore. And then on top of that, 75% of terrestrial wildlife needs a natural shoreline to survive. When we're looking at properties that have just a manicured lawn, there's like zero habitat for our native wildlife species. Even more so whenever we have concrete retaining walls or those hardened shorelines, it's really tough for some of these small mammals, frogs, turtles to be transitioning from land to water. With a thick concrete wall, there's no way for them to access the land. And then there's a lack of food source as well in these areas, which a lot of our small mammals need. Even with overhanging brush, so if you have a shoreline, um, even if there's a retaining wall, if you're planting behind it, that overhanging brush then creates shade in that very shallow section of the water there. And this area is quite important. It provides great habitat for some of these small fish species, frogs, turtles, to hide from predators, as well as get much needed shade and refuge from the sun and the hot summer temperatures. Another big benefit of natural shorelines is that they improve water quality. How that works is native vegetation slows overland runoff and increases infiltration so that water is sinking into the soil basically, and then it's flowing through the plants that are there. And those plants' root systems will filter out any excess nutrients and toxins, and then you'll have cleaner water running into the nearby waterway. So you can see this is a great infographic showing the difference between having a natural shoreline versus having a manicured lawn. So with those plants in place, we're going from 15 to 50% infiltration, and we're losing a lot less with overland runoff. On top of that, it helps to slow it down because during those really heavy rain events, those big storm events that we're really starting to see more common nowadays, is that with those big rains and the heavy raindrops falling, when you have those different layers of canopy, so we have trees, large shrubs, understory shrubs, getting down into grasses, sedges, wildflowers, it really does slow down the impact of those big raindrops and just slows down the whole overland runoff really, really effectively. And in line with slowing overland runoff, natural shorelines really do help to stabilize the soil there. Native plants have great root systems, and they all grow deep into the soil, work really well together to basically create a basket and hold on to all of that soil. Exposed soil is really vulnerable to erosion. You can see this in the photo here. So this was a photo taken not too far away from where our office is, and they had effectively or they had taken out the understory plant species there, left only a few trees in place, and you can already start to see the erosion start to occur. We have some roots already beginning to be exposed, and it's on such a steep slope, it's really going to start to erode very quickly now that that soil has been exposed. And then in the following photo here, this is another type of erosion that can occur. Typically described as undercutting erosion. So what happens here is the waves and boat wakes come in and they hit the shoreline and will start to really pull that soil away and out into the water. Here they do have some plants in place. Erosion is a natural does occur naturally as well, but when those plants are removed and there isn't enough of an understory, that's when we start to see issues. So in scenarios like this, adding extra plants is great. Sometimes doing an extra step and putting in like vegetated riprap, which I'll be talking about a little later on in the presentation, would be effective here as well. But any type of retaining wall or riprap is better when you bring plants into that combination as well. I'll also mention that plants really do also help with any flooding that can occur. So not only does it help to absorb extra water on your shoreline, but during those flood scenarios, it slows down the flooding process. So having those overhanging trees and shrubs slows down the impact that it's going to have along the edges of your waterfront property. Now, this is a great infographic. I love to share this. We really tried to capture the difference between having a mowed grass to having native vegetation on your shoreline. When you keep a manicured lawn cut and mow it regularly, you're going to have very short root systems underneath. My general rule of thumb that I like to talk to landowners about is what you see above the ground is the length of the root system that's happening underneath. So you can imagine like how short you keep those manicured lawns, those grasses, that's the length of the root system underneath. When you bring in wildflowers, native grasses, sedges, different sizes of shrubs and trees as well, you have really great different types of root systems all growing deep into the ground and all working together to hold that soil in place. Not only this, but there's like different types of root systems. So taproot versus fibrous roots that can grow laterally to really be effective at holding that soil. Another great benefit, which I don't think people think about too often when it comes to natural shorelines, is that it really does help to regulate water temperatures. So with climate change, our waters are warming. And this is especially affected when you have a developed shoreline like that top picture. So we don't have any plants above there and it's not shading out the shoreline. That littoral zone is the shallowest part of the lake, and that's what will heat up more quickly and then cause those water temperatures to rise. And then on top of that, when you have concrete retaining walls like that photo above, imagine in the summertime when you're walking on pavement in bare feet and how hot that can get. So in the summer, when the sun heats up that concrete retaining wall or those rocks or hardened shoreline, they heat up quite quickly, and then that warmth transfers to the cooler waters. So that's how we're starting to see more warming as well. Whereas in the bottom photo there, that's a natural shoreline. That's actually one that we had naturalized a few years ago, and it's quite effective at shading out sections of that shoreline. So not that a retaining wall would have to be removed, but planting directly behind it will help to create that shade and create that overhanging debris to create that habitat. Another benefit that a lot of people like is that natural shorelines also really help to deter geese. They can be quite a nuisance, and I've seen it. It's very effective. I've been on natural shorelines, and I've seen about 30 geese just swim by, and they've gone right up to the next door neighbor who had a bit of a beach and then a manicured lawn, and they came up and spent the whole day there. Really, how it's effective is that geese, when they're swimming by, they don't want to go on land where they're not sure if there's any predators there. So if you have trees, some shrubs that they can't see past, they're not as likely to come up on land. If you just had a lawn there, then obviously it's wide open. They can see that there's nothing there to harm them, and they're going to come up on land for the day. One other that I didn't make a slide for, but it really ties in all of these different aspects together, especially when it comes to improving water quality and stabilizing soils, is that having a natural shoreline in the long run is best to protect your um, property value. When people are looking to sell their property, the ones that are there then that are wanting to buy it, they're going to obviously go for a lake that has the best water quality. Uh, Typically, you're buying it because you want to be out there swimming, boating, fishing, and to do that, you're going to want to be on a very a clean and healthy lake. So by having a natural shoreline, not only are you getting all of these benefits that I just spoke about, but you'll be protecting your property value as well. Now, my next slides, I'm going to try with these videos. I wanted to put all of this together and show you an underwater video of a developed shoreline and a natural one. So this will really show the impact that a developed shoreline has underwater. So you can see in the video that it was manicured lawn. They also removed majority of aquatic vegetation that was there. So there was very little habitat for any aquatic life, any fish. We didn't see any fish in this video. We see a bit of garbage, and it's just so murky because everything gets stirred up so easily when there isn't that vegetation in place to hold that substrate down. Looking at the next video here, uh, you can see this overhanging tree above. It's a very natural section of shoreline, and you'll see the stark difference, what happens underneath. So you can see that it was very clear. There's a lot of aquatic vegetation. Right away, there was a school of fish. Water clarity is there. Really, really different from the video we just watched. And the big thing about this is that both of these videos were taken on the same lake. So you can see what a difference it has just on that the water directly in front of the shoreline when you go from developed to natural. All right, so we talked about the issues that Canada's lakes are facing. We talked now about all of the benefits that you receive whenever you have a natural shoreline. So I wanted to go over with you how you can create a healthy shoreland and a climate resilient waterfront. So first of all, you can bring the natural edge to your property. It's a great program to really help guide you through the whole naturalization process. And I'm very excited that this year we're working with Tori and the Nashwaak Watershed Association to bring the natural edge to your area. We're going to provide them with all the tools and resources, the use of the Natural Edge app and our database, and they're going to deliver in your community. So if you're interested, I highly recommend that you reach out to them to learn more. They'll guide you, like I said, they'll guide you through the whole process, provide a site visit, develop a plan, and recommend the best native plants to add to your shoreline. A few common native plants that would be typical, that would be good for your area. This is again just a selection. I know Tori has quite a list that she's been looking at for what she can do. But typical ones that we use are service berries. They are great food source for birds in the springtime. They're a beautiful showy flower, and they have a great root system to be planted along the shoreline. Same with red osier dogwood. Uh, Fantastic for erosion control. I've seen on properties where just one red osier dogwood bush was about 5 feet out in front of the rest of the shoreline. And that's because that root system was there and it held that shoreline in place, while all of the surrounding shoreline on either side of it that didn't have anything planted was washed away and eroded away. A great one that we also like to use commonly is bush honeysuckle. This is because it's one that does stay lower. It's a lower shrub to be planted. A key thing of our Natural Edge program is to work with the landowners so that we're creating a shoreline that's both beneficial and provides all of those benefits that we talked about before, but it's still functional for your lifestyle. We understand that when you live on waterfront property, you want to be able to see the lake, you want to be able to access it, and spend that time right on the water there. And that's obviously, we don't want to be taking that away. So we really try hard to work with you so that we're creating a mutually beneficial shoreline. I also really encourage landowners to be bringing in a tree or two on their property just for that different type of root system, the shade that it creates. It's always great to be bringing one or two or hopefully more trees onto their property, depending on the size of it. A great option is white birch. There's also different types of maples. Willows are a great species to have along the shoreline as well. So there really are a lot of options out there, and that's how we try and really help you through with your whole process. If you're curious to look this up on your own, we also have our native plant database online, and this is available for anybody to use. It's based on Canada's plant hardiness zone. So all you'd have to do is to go in and use our interactive hardiness zone map to figure out which zone you're in based on your location. And then if you have a general idea of your soil type, moisture level, sunlight availability for where you're looking to put these plants, you can add all of that into our database and it will help to filter through our native plants and give the ones that are best recommended for you. This is the same database that's built into the back end of our Natural Edge app when we're designing your plans. So it's all in sync, but this is just a way for you to really, I guess, take that first step, look into some plants, and see what you'd want to be adding to your shoreline. We also have various guides that are free for download from our website. So one of them being our guide to building resilient shorelines. This talks about shoreline planting, but then a lot of other recommendations to do on your property, such as making it reducing the amount of hardened surfaces so that you're able to handle those heavy rains better instead of it running just directly into your lake. Talking about light pollution, things like that. We have our shoreline habitat creation manual. Again, this gives great detail on planting your shoreline. It gives step-by-step on how to determine the soil type that you have, the moisture level, as well as step-by-step on how to properly plant along your shoreline. We have our wildflower garden guide. I will say that this, because we're based out of Ontario and that's where we started all of our delivery, this has a bit more of more species that are suited for Ontario, but it's still a great guide and a lot of those would carry over to New Brunswick as well. And then we have a native plant care guide. So anybody who does a naturalization on their own or who takes part in the Natural Edge program, they'll get a copy of the native plant care guide. And this gives great tips on how often you should be watering your new plants, when you can look at remulching or adding mulch or hemp mats around your plants. Mulch is a great way to keep grass competition down from growing directly around it, increases the amount of sunlight that plants have available to them, and also helps to retain moisture after big rainfalls. So all of these free for download on our website. We have many more resources as well, different fact sheets. We have a guide to creating your own planting plan through our Planning for Shorelands program. So I highly encourage you to check out our website and see all the links that we have. I mentioned retaining walls a few times in this presentation. We come across them quite often, and we always recommend landowners to plant directly behind them. Although in the 50s and 60s, these were a big thing for cottages.
Hello?
And
Yeah.
and what we're seeing now is that they're starting to fail and to break away. So depending on the state of that retaining wall, we do recommend that you start planting directly behind it and get those root systems in place. If you're doing if you're removing the full retaining wall, then coming in with a vegetated riprap afterwards would be great. So here's a project that we did. So I was talking about vegetated riprap. Riprap is basically like a river stone that's that you can move by hand. It's not too large. And typically this is for areas where you're having experiencing significant erosion and simply planting would not be enough. They don't have enough time to establish the root systems and actually start to hold that soil in place. So this is the next best option. Working with a construction company, the landowner had regraded their slope. We then came in, planted different native species. Here we have some red osier dogwood. I think we did some native roses as well and a few trees. And we planted those along the shoreline. And then afterwards, the contractor came back and laid out like a cloth and then rocks on top. If we didn't have that cloth there, then with the next rain and waves, it would start to pull that soil out in between the rocks and we'd start to lose it again. This is a great combination to have in those situations because rocks are like the quick solution. They will stop that erosion right away. But then you have those plants that are working in the background and they're the long-term solution for erosion. Doing both works really well because the rocks allow time for those plants to grow their root systems and effectively hold on to that soil in the future, as well as help to anchor those rocks. Over time, rocks will fall with waves and boat wakes and ice push and everything like that. So having both of them there, they work really well together. So I believe we did this one in like 2015. And then a few years later, this is what it looked like. So the landowners are really happy with the results. They've really just let it take over and naturalize. We had a flood, they would have had a flood in 2017 and 2019. And speaking with them afterwards, they said it handled that flooding great. It was really, really effective. And they were happy to go with taller shrubs on towards the edges of their property to create that privacy, while we still left a view looking out over the steps there. So this was a great project and landowners thought it was really effective. I've spoken a bit about the aquatic vegetation in the littoral zone. So I always just recommend landowners to leave that in place. Again, it creates great shade and refuge areas and helps to break up wave impact. I know a lot of people will remove that or want to remove it because that's where they love to swim. So I just recommend that you can clear a pathway out to get to deeper water. So that way you're still leaving all of those aquatic vegetation in the majority. of the area right in front of your house or your cottage. Now, getting to the lake, some people may already have a pathway in place, others might not. And it's part of the design process when you're naturalizing your shoreline is to create a designated pathway. It's best to have a curved pathway as that really helps to slow water runoff during heavy storms, spring melt, all that, and will reduce the amount of erosion that will occur over time. If it's too steep that you need actual steps to access the water, then this kind of steps would be raised steps that have minimal touch points and open back as well, so that water can flow through rather than run off along sides. If you have stairs that are built into the ground or made of pavers or concrete, that's where you start to see that excess water flow off to the side and cause erosion along the edges. And just a few additional actions to take. This is a great infographic that we have planning for shoreland, but it just go over other things to consider when developing property. But even just things to take away if your property is already developed and things like, again, reducing properly direct runoff to vegetated areas and create permeable surfaces like driveways and sitting areas. Another big takeaway that we always talk to landowners about is to check their septic systems as well, as that can lead to nutrient loading right on their lake. So just to wrap up, here's a few photos of natural edge projects that we've done in the past. This was one of the first sites that I had done back in 2016. We worked with a group of volunteers. It was completely manicured lawn before. They suffered from flooding, they had erosion, and they had a real problem with geese as well. So we worked with them to plant 800 trees, shrubs, and wildflowers. A lot of pot stock actually went into the site because it's so large. And then we did a great wildflower garden through it as well. So it took about 3 days to plant everything. But then 3 years later, this is what it looked like. And I love this top photo because yes, we did plant wildflowers in a certain section, but it wasn't actually in that spot. So that's just everything that spread from seed over 3 years. And they've noticed such a big difference has occurred. They aren't dealing with geese. They're not noticing the flooding like they did every spring before. And I like to say they took really good care of it, but really they didn't have to take care of this. Their area was so wet that they just created a no-mow zone, would mow up to it, as you can see in the bottom picture, and then would let the area just naturalize and take over. So different sections of their shoreline look different now. Where that potted stock really took hold, they just have larger shrubs. And then in the front, those wildflowers have really spread out nicely. So to date, our Natural Edge program has restored over 36 kilometers of shoreline. We've created over 90 acres of riparian habitat and restored that. And we've done that by planting over 143,000 native trees, shrubs, and wildflowers. So we're very excited to be working with the Nashwaak Watershed Association this year and bringing this program to your region. So thank you. I'll leave it at that for any questions.
Hello, everyone. We had some technical difficulties during our webinar last night. So this is a re-recording of the second portion of the webinar, outlining the Natural Edge program within the Nashwaak Watershed. So I'll just give a quick breakdown of the Nashwaak Watershed Association's Natural Edge program, and then tell you how you can get involved. So our Natural Edge program offers smaller scale restoration for riverbank stabilization on privately owned and landowner properties. As Chloe mentioned, there are many reasons that natural shorelines or shorelands are beneficial, including improving water quality, reducing erosion, reintroducing native species, and biodiversity. It's a great way to keep your land in place by planting native species. Because of the amazing funding that we're able to get each year, this is all also free and available to all waterfront property owners in the watershed. So as I mentioned, the program is completely free, and there are several things that we can help landowners with. So once someone contacts us, we like to go out for our initial site visit to check out the property and chat with the landowners about what they're looking for. Following our site visit, we do a bit of research, see what kinds of plants we can source, and offer some tips and recommendations on the best species to plant. Based on the site, the conditions, and the landowner's aesthetic preferences, we do our best to see what we can find. And once we've made our recommendations, we work to make sure we can source the plants and then find a time to come out and help with the planting. After all the plants are in the ground, we typically try to come out and check them for at least a year or two post-planting to make sure that everything is looking good. These photos here are also photos of one of the properties that we helped out with last spring. So we planted around 400 trees, and then on the right there you can see the bank, and we planted around 500 willow and dogwood stakes there. These are also a couple examples of some species that we planted this year for our Natural Edge program. So on the far left, there's a bur oak. There's some willow stakes sprouting in the middle there, and then a silver maple on the far right. And finally, how can you get involved with us? So there are lots of easy ways to get involved. If you're interested in learning more about Natural Edge, or you want to see if the program is a good fit for you, you can simply reach out to me after you see this webinar. My email address will be on the next slide, and we have lots of information booklets that we'd be happy to share, and I can also offer some more details. If it doesn't seem like the program for you, but you still want to get involved, you can also check out our website, follow us on social media, sign up for our newsletter, or even become a member. We have lots of events and volunteer opportunities that happen throughout the year. And we also have 2 other landowner programs that we offer. So we have Natural Yard in the spring, as well as Forest Stewardship for woodlot owners. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions about these programs. And that is it for me. Thank you all for listening, and please feel free to reach out to me with any questions at the email address that is just on the slide here. Thank you so much.